Today is Wednesday, May 13th, and we are going to be going over area and perimeter word problems. So we're going to kind of start with refreshing your brain with what area and perimeter are, the vocab words, of course, and then practicing some of the simpler problems we've done this year. And then we will move over to them in word problem form. It shouldn't be anything too crazy, but it's just getting you into a deeper review of those concepts. And then, of course, we will move on to our final day of your word problem of the week. So you're just going to want to finish up that Two Brothers problem and be ready for Thursday for me to go over all of your work. So I kind of gave you that nice head start that I like to give you with pulling out the numbers and setting up the question. And now it's kind of yours to take over and finish up today if you did not yesterday. And then we're on to a new article. It's called A Robot Suit, and it is in your packet or online. You know the drill. Whichever one works for you works for us. Epic and AR Reading, please, please, please. I've been super impressed with the people on Epic and all your little goals and times that you guys have been doing. So just keep up the good work with that Epic work. And of course, any book you have in a shelf that especially is at your reading level, because those ones are going to push you further, are the ones you want to be in. Harry Potter, we are already kind of pushing towards the end of that first book, which is kind of crazy to think, but a chapter a day when there's only 17 starts to get going. So we are on chapter 13. It's getting pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot different from the movie in terms of detail and backstory, which I have been enjoying. So I hope you're along for the ride. The chapter's not too long today. And then power writing, of course, we're on to day 20.
Multiplication. Ooh, yeah, let's do some fraction multiplication.
All right, for math, we are going to be doing, as I told you, area and perimeter word problems. So in your actual packet, this will be your page over here. And for your classroom, Google Classroom, it will be up here, of course, for Wednesday. And then the forms always is open and there for you to take your path. All right, so area and perimeter, we want to start with what our focus is and then get you a definition to kind of recall the knowledge that we've went over before. So our first one is, I can use what I know about area and perimeter to solve real world problems involving rectangles. So this is a very direct purpose today. You are going to be expected to use that knowledge. And as this is a review, I didn't just want to jump into your word problems because part of this kind of fun online experience is the fact that we're able to take the time and go back and review skills. So I wanted to make sure that if area and perimeter haven't really been in your mind lately, that I'm not skipping to a word problem and throwing it at you, because that wouldn't be very fair. So if you are already like, Miss Pritzell, perimeter area, got it, good, I'm moving on. Of course, move on to that packet for word problems. But if you're still just wanting to make sure and double check that you're on the right track, then you're in the right place to stay along the ride with me here for a little bit. All right, that being said, the definition for perimeter is the total distance around an object. So I really love this picture and have kind of spread it upon each of the slides because it tells you and reminds you of the concept that we're dealing with here. So perimeter is going to be the outside. You're going to add up all of the sides, and I really like that you just see perimeter written all the way around. Area is the amount of space an object covers. So often my kids will hear me say, the perimeter is your walls. So if we went around and we measured all the walls of our classroom, great. The area is the carpet. It's inside and what's on. It's kind of that joke of that song I sing you guys to annoy you guys a little bit. It's the grass that's on the playground. So it's that inner carpeting. It's that inner space that is taken up. A lot of area models and that kind of stuff can start ringing bells for you to keep that concept alive, because all of them rely back on that idea that it's the amount of space an object covers. So I'm going to play this song for you to kind of reactivate that knowledge, and then we are going to get started on some math.
It's the year 2060 and you're colonizing Mars. You're about to buy a plot of land, but you have a dog and you want to make sure he has enough space to run around. You also want to build a fence so he can't escape. So first you want to know how big the backyard is, and then you want to know how far it is around. To figure this out, you have to find
the area. That's the space inside. For a rectangle, its length and width are multiplied. And perimeter, the distance around the shape. Just add the sides together and then you'll be great with the area. That's the space inside. For a rectangle, its length and width are multiplied. And perimeter, the distance around the shape. Just add the sides together and then you'll be great. Yeah. Here I am on Mars, trying to find out the size of my backyard. Well, it's a rectangle, right? So what if we cut it into squares of the same size that are 1 unit long by 1 unit wide? These are called square units. Add them all up, surprise! You got 72 square units, or feet, cause that's the unit we're using. Well, who has time to count squares? Length times width is the quickest way to get there. Yeah, that's how you find the area. A nice little formula that'll take care of you. And I need to hurry cause my dog is starving. Let's find the area so I can feed Marvin. My yard is 9 feet long by 8 feet wide. I get the area when I multiply each side. And 9 times 8 is 72. But here's another way for you to think it through. Basically, you take the rows, column, and figure how many square units fit inside of those. Yo, my backyard is wide, 8 feet. So that's 8 rows with 9 square units in each. So multiply the 8 rows by the 9 square units, you get 72. Yup, you knew it. The area, that's the space inside. For a rectangle, its length and width are multiplied. And perimeter, the distance around the shape. Just add the sides together and then you'll be great with the area. That's the space inside. For a rectangle, its length and width are multiplied. And perimeter, the distance around the shape. Just add the sides together and then you'll be great. Now I've got my area for my yard on Mars, and there's plenty of room for Marvin to live large. But now I need a fence, cause I heard the animals on Mars could be intense. So I'll need a perimeter, the distance around my whole yard. How do you get it? Yeah, just add up the length of the sides. 9 plus 8 plus 8 plus 9's a perimeter of 34 feet. And oh yeah, that's regular units and not units squared. So let's take a look from another angle. To get the perimeter of a square or rectangle, you add 2 widths plus 2 lengths. Here's a formula, don't forget to say thanks. 2 times length plus 2 times width to get a square or rectangle's perimeter quick. So let's try it with my Martian backyard. Come on, get ready, y'all. It's not that hard. 2 times the length of 9 is 18. And 2 times the width of 8 is 16. And 16 plus 18 is 34. Now if I could stop Marvin from making a dirty floor. Come on, Marvin. Seriously.
All right. So we are going to get started in that review that I kind of promised you before we jump into the word problems. So the first question I have for you is, what is the perimeter? I gave you a sample rectangle that is 1 inch by 3 inches, and you're going to ask yourself, okay, if I need to find the perimeter, first, what is the perimeter? The perimeter is going to be all the sides added together. So you want to look right here. It says all the sides added together. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to start adding each of my sides together. I know a rectangle, especially from our quadrilateral lesson yesterday. See, it builds, I tell you. We know a quadrilateral, or this rectangle, has 4 sides. So we also know a second thing from that lesson. With a rectangle, which is our main focus today, as it said in our learning intention, that they have 2 sides that are congruent and 2 sides that are congruent. If we had a square, you would say, no, Miss Brinsell, there's 4 sides that are congruent. So congruent means the same. So they would all be the same size. We know that's not the case with our rectangle, and we can see also by what they give us here. So I do want you guys to realize, whoa, all of this stuff is building. There is a foundation that I have for this to make sense of the math that's going on. So that being said, the first side, keep it simple, 1 inch. Okay, that's my orange side, got it, colored it, good. Now we're moving on. What's my next one? I have 3 inches. Okay, Now, is that it? No, I have not covered all my sides, which is why I like using colors, because sometimes we get lost. Sometimes we get going and saying, well, that was the only two numbers they gave us. Look back here. That's all that's on the paper. Yeah, but remember, we're not just going to say, okay, that's the sides. We know better than that. We know, especially because of our color, we have two sides that we have not covered. They're both black. We haven't added them in. So now you're going to come back and go, well, Miss Brinsell, I have no idea what to do. That side down here is just black. It has no number. And the side down here is black and has no number. But wait, you're going to go back and pull that knowledge, pull that file from your quadrilateral lesson and say, well, I know there's two congruent sides. So I know that if this side's 1 inch, then the side over here, they're congruent. They're the same size. So that means I need to add another 1 inch because they are congruent. They are equal. I know that. That is just a fact of rectangles. So now that I know that, 1 inch plus 3 inches plus 1 inch, I'm not done yet. I still have one black side. What's that one? That one's not labeled either. Well, if there's two congruent sides, I have two orange. I only have one side that's 3 inches. So that means there's another side that's 3 inches. And that would make sense because look, they're the exact same length. All right, that makes sense. So now I'm going to do what I know is right for perimeter because I told you all the sides are added together. So I'm going to add 1 inch plus 3 inches. That's 4 inches. And I have my fingers up if you could see me. Then I'm going to add one more to 4 and I get 5. And then I'm going to move over to my second hand and say 6, 7, 8. And I know that the perimeter, all the sides added together of this rectangle, is 8 inches. Done. That is my perimeter. Now I am going to say, okay, my job today is not only to review perimeter, but to review area. So now let me try to figure out what on earth is the area. So I see in my picture that it's the inside. I know Miss Brinsell told me it's this thing about carpet and carpet on the inside of a room. Okay, well, thanks for that, but I don't see any carpet. I just see a rectangle with 1 inch and 3 inches. What on earth am I going to do? I'm going to ground myself and I'm going to say, what is the area? The area is the inside, which I know is going to be length times width. Length times width is the formula for area. And you know what? I have the length and I have the width, so I can find the area. So let's get started. You know that your length is 3 inches. Okay. And then I need to times it by my width. Well, the width of this rectangle is 1 inch. Now I can use my knowledge of multiplication to find the area. 3 times 1, or 3 inches times 1 inch, is 3 inches. And I like to bring these boxes back for you because, like I said, with the carpet, you want to be thinking you're going to have 1 inch by 3, and it's going to go 1, 2, 3. And you can count these boxes also at the end and say 1, 2, 3. I have 3 inches. That makes sense. My model also makes sense that I'm used to doing for multiplication also can help me know my area, and solving for my area was done correctly. So always be willing to pull back and pull in those things you know to confirm the newer skills that you're practicing. All right, so now it's our game time to move over to doing this in a word problem. We are going to do 2. We're going to do one for perimeter and one for area. I'm not going to tell you which one's which or which one's first. That's going to be our job because today when you have your independent work, you're going to be responsible for not just solving for perimeter and area, but solving for whichever one is needed. So whichever one the problem is calling for, just as you would do when it's an addition, subtraction, division, or a multiplication problem, you have to solve and figure out what you're supposed to find. You've done this before, and now you're just having to use this type of knowledge, differentiating between perimeter and area. And I'm going to show you how that looks. So it says Tina needs to buy a custom frame for a picture from her trip. The length of the picture is 8 inches and the width is 6 inches. How many square inches of glass will she need? So what am I going to do? Am I going to sit here and say, let me get a coin out. If it's heads, it's area. And if it's tails, it's perimeter. And I'll solve that one. And hopefully Miss Brinsell will know I tried. No. Say no. Okay, I know you said no. I can already tell. You have to break this down, and how we're going to do that is we're going to first Draw a picture and annotate this problem, just as we would any other problem. We're not going to freak out trying to know it all by the first read. That's not realistic. So let's start and set up. We know we have length of the picture is 8 inches, okay? We'll keep those purple because we know length is 8. So let's draw our picture and know, okay, 8 inches. We have a picture. Let's draw it. And let's put the label on of what we know and move forward. And the width is 6 inches. All right, now I'm looking back at those problems that I did before that I felt comfortable with. But now the problem is, what am I going to do? Am I going to solve for area or am I going to solve for perimeter? That's going to be very different. Are you adding? Are you multiplying? Which one am I going to do? So let's now look at the question. What are we supposed to find? How many square inches of glass will she need? Where did glass come from? Tina needs to buy a custom frame for a picture. Okay, so this isn't a carpet or a classroom. This is a picture. And Tina's trying to find glass that's going to cover her picture. Oh, so it's kind of like those frames I have in my house that my mom has, and that the glass covers the entire picture. So I'm not just going to want to have a frame, which would be the perimeter and all the sides. I actually have to cover the entire thing. So that kind of sounds like what area is. Look at that. It covers the entire surface. All right, so I'm going to try to find the area of my picture. How am I going to do that? What is the area? What is the equation? I know the equation is multiplication because it's length times width. So, okay, area is, I'm going to have 8 times, and what am I multiplying by? 8 times, 6. Then I have to solve. So now I'm going to have to go back and make sure my multiplication is correct, or this whole problem is going to be wrong and I'm not going to get the amount of glass that I need to cover my picture. 8 times 6 is 48 square inches. Now, where did Miss Brunzell pull square inches? Oh, here it is. How many square inches? So we want to make sure we label, because we know that 48 feet, 48 centimeters, all those type of things are very different. So you want to make sure you're measuring specifically to the correct measurement that you agreed upon and need, so Tina gets the right amount of glass for her frame. All right, you completed this problem. Now we're going to move on to another problem. It says, Jamie is putting up a fence around her garden. How much fencing will she need if the length of the fence is 12 feet and the width is 9 feet? Okay, so we're no longer talking about a picture and glass. We're talking about a garden, and Jamie's trying to put up a fence. So a fence goes around the outside. Okay, so let's draw a picture. So we have a picture, and we found out that the length of the fence is 12 feet. Okay, so the length is 12 feet and the width is 9 feet. Now we need to figure out if we're adding, multiplying, what are we doing? Area or perimeter? So if we're going to put a fence around the garden, then that means the garden must be on the inside. The garden's going to be where the area is. The fence would almost be like walls. It's going to be the perimeter around our garden. So we're not going to be doing area this time. We're going to be finding the perimeter. I want you to pause here and try to add all the sides. All right, so you should have 12 feet plus 9 feet, and you know it's a rectangle, so you have 2 sides that are congruent, so you're going to add another 12 for down here, and this last side is going to be 9 feet. And when you add it all up, your solution is the amount of fencing you will need is 42 feet. 42 feet of fencing is what you need to make sure your garden has a fence around it. All right, now it's your turn to practice. Take your time, annotate, draw your pictures, and make sure you're really thinking about and coming back to this picture. A perimeter is that outside fence that goes all around, and that inside is that garden. What are you covering? What is the square inches, square feet, the inside amount that you are covering for your
Multiplication, multiplication. Ooh, yeah, let's do some fraction multiplication.
All right, you are continuing today your problem of the week on the two brothers with fractions. I do hesitate on taking you any further because of the question and what this problem is requiring you to think about with fractions. So I am going to come out tomorrow with all 6 boxes. If you are stuck, I would make sure to go back to the video on Tuesday that walks you through pulling out that stuff. But I feel like if I take even just one step forward, the answer is going to be out there for you. So just read it carefully, think about the question, and don't overthink this one, guys, because you're going to be going, are you kidding? So see you tomorrow with the answers. Give it your best shot and finish it off the best you can.
In every text you read, you must read close to see the most important point. You know that's called the main idea. One sentence that just sums it up. So let's go. Let's find the main idea.
All right, our new article today for Achieve is a robot suit. So you're going to be looking for these cool people with little robot legs on, going up and down stairs in your packet and right now. And say, a Cyberdean is a company in Japan. It is making a robotic suit. The suit can help people who have trouble walking. What is the suit like? It comes with a belt and leg braces. The belt has a small computer in it that reads the user's brain signals. Then the computer tells the leg braces to move. This helps the user walk. Cyberdean will make and rent the suits in October. The company showed the suit. 2 people wearing the suits walked up and down the stairs. Yoshiyuki Sankai, the head of Cyberdean, was happy to see his suit in action. He believes that there is a great need for the suit. It could be very helpful for people who are older or disabled. For now, the suit can be rented only in Japan for $2,200 a month. So these are those 2 people that were showing off the suit. And it says it connects with a belt and then it goes down your leg for robotic legs. Let's come over to the dictionary, which has pictures today. And it says a brace is a noun, anything that joins to something else to make it stronger. This man is wearing a brace around his knee. This helps his knee be stronger. So they want to let you know that a brace is, of course, you've seen them likely if you get an injury in sports, you see it, and it can be for your wrist, it can be for your knee, it can be for your back. There's multiple braces, and the idea behind brace, and people can think of for their teeth, you can get braces, and all of those things come back to that definition that says anything that joins to something to make it stronger. Brain signal is a noun, and it's when a person's brain tells the body what to do. The brain is the part of the body used for thinking. So a brain signal is a message sent out by the brain to another part of the body. So your brain is that control center, and it tells your body what to do, just as if your brain, you have to say, I need to walk, and your brain sends a signal and moves your leg. Just like your hands, you have to send the signal to pick something up, and we do this without really thinking about it or knowing that we're thinking about it, but your brain is constantly sending these signals. So for this robotic leg, they've tapped into that and used brain signals to activate these suits, which is so cool, which is why this Achieve article is out, because it's a very interesting and new concept for people that are disabled or need these legs to walk. Disabled is an adjective for our next word, and it says not able to walk or do something else that others can do. So disabled is for multiple things. You know it as, you might say, oh, are those for those blue parking spots that people who are disabled can have? Yes, that would be where that word you might have heard before. But disabled is when you're not able to walk, of course, or do something else that others can do. So it's not just for walking, even though that might be the common one, especially for this article, that's kind of what they're referring to. But there's multiple reasons or things that make someone disabled. Here it says this man is disabled, he cannot walk, he needs a wheelchair. So he is disabled because he's not able to walk, that's what he can't do that other people can do, and he uses a wheelchair to help him do that. Now, down here it says rent, which is a verb, and it says to give money to use something for a short time. So they said that you would have to rent these suits. So the word rent means that people would have to give money in order to get them. So you're not just going to walk up and get one of these suits and walk around with it. You have to pay for it and rent it. So an example is, see this house, you cannot buy it, but you can rent it. You can pay money each month to live in it. So your parents, you might hear them say that they pay rent, or you see signs that say rentals. That just means that you can pay money each month, each week, whatever it is, to stay in or keep that item and rent. Finally, robotic is an adjective, and it has to do with a robot. So for an example, this is a robotic arm. It can pick up and move things in places that are dangerous for people to be. For example, in Mars.
First thing you've got to do is read. Don't stop until
You
you've
have
read.
the prompt for Wednesday, and it's marked number 20, and it says, finish this sentence. If my dog could talk, you could use another type of animal instead, such as a cat or a pet snake. So you really want to today be thinking of, if there is an animal in your house, or even an animal you've always wanted, anything like that. The example is a dog, but it says you can use something else. Imagine that it could talk, and then that's what's going to lead you into writing your story for 3 minutes today. Bring that animal to life. Chapter 13, Nicholas Flamel. Dumbledore had convinced Harry not to go looking for the Mirror of Erased again. And for the rest of the Christmas holidays, the invisibility cloak stayed folded at the bottom of his trunk. Harry wished he could forget what he had seen in the mirror as easily, but he couldn't. He started having nightmares. Over and over again, he dreamed about his parents disappearing in a flash of green light, while a high voice cackled with laughter. You see, Dumbledore was right. That mirror could drive you mad, said Ron, when Harry told him about these dreams. Hermione, who came back the day before term started, took a different view of things. She was torn between horror at the idea of Harry being out of bed, roaming the school 3 nights in a row. If Filch had caught you, and disappointed that he hadn't at least found out who Nicholas Flamel was. They had almost given up hope of ever finding Flamel in a library book, even though Harry was still sure he'd read the name somewhere. Once term had started, they were back to skimming through books for 10 minutes during their breaks. Harry had even less time than the other two, because Quidditch practice had started. Wood was working the team harder than ever. Even the endless rain that had replaced the snow couldn't dampen his spirits. The Weasley complained that Wood was becoming a fanatic, but Harry was on Wood's side. If they won their next match against Hufflepuff, they would overtake Slytherin in the house championship for the first time in 7 years. Quite apart from wanting to win, Harry found that he had fewer nightmares when he was tired out after training. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave the team a bit of bad news. He'd just gotten very angry with the Weasleys, who kept dive-bombing each other and pretending to fall off their brooms. Will you stop messing around? He yelled. That's exactly the sort of thing that'll lose a match. Snap's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor. George Weasley really did fall off his broom at these words. Snape's refereeing? He spluttered through a mouthful of mud. When's he's ever refereed a Quidditch match? He's not going to be fair if we might overtake Slytherin. The rest of the team landed next to George to complain too. It's not my fault, said Wood. We've just got to make sure we play a clean game, so Snape hasn't got an excuse to pick on us. Which was all very well, thought Harry, but he had another reason for not wanting Snape near him while he was playing Quidditch. The rest of the team hung back to talk to one another, as usual at the end of practice, but Harry headed straight back to the Gryffindor common room, where he found Ron and Hermione playing chess. Chess was the only thing Hermione ever lost at, something Harry and Ron thought was very good for her. Don't talk to me for a moment, said Ron, when Harry sat down next to him. I need to He caught sight of Harry's face. What's the matter with you? You look terrible. Speaking quietly so that no one else would hear, Harry told the other two about Snape's sudden, sinister desire to be a Quidditch referee. Don't play, said Hermione at once. Say you're ill, said Ron. Pretend to break your leg, Hermione suggested. Really break your leg, said Ron. I can't, said Harry. There isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all. At that moment, Neville toppled into the common room. How he's managed to climb through the portrait hole was anyone's guess, because his legs had been stuck together with what they recognized at once as the leg locker curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell over laughing, except Hermione, who leapt up and performed the counter curse. Neville's legs sprang apart, and he got to his feet trembling. What happened? Hermione asked him, leading him over to sit with Ron and Harry. Malfoy, said Neville shakingly. I met him outside the library. He said he'd been looking for someone to practice that on. Go to Professor McGonagall, Hermione urged Neville. Report him. Neville shook his head. I don't want more trouble, he mumbled. You've got to stand up to him, Neville, said Ron. He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me. I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that. Neville choked out. Harry felt in the pocket of his robe and pulled out a chocolate frog, the very last one from the box Hermione had given him for Christmas. He gave it to Neville, who looked as though he might cry. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? And stinking Slytherin. Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile as he unwrapped the frog. Thanks, Harry. I think I'll go to bed. Do you want the card? You collect them, don't you? As Neville walked away, Harry looked at the famous wizard card. Dumbledore again, he said. He was the first one I ever... He gasped. He stared at the back of the card. Then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. I found him, he whispered. I found Flamel. I told you I read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Greenwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Hermione jumped to her feet. She hadn't looked so excited since they'd gotten back the marks for their very first piece of homework. Stay there, she said, and she sprinted up the stairs to the girls' dormitories. Harry and Ron barely had time to exchange mystified looks before she was dashing back, an enormous old book in her arms. I never thought to look in here, she whispered excitedly. I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading. Light? Said Ron, but Hermione told him to be quiet. Until she looked something up and started flicking frantically through the pages, muttering to herself. At last she found what she was looking for. I knew it! I knew it! Are we allowed to speak yet? Said Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. Nicholas Flamel, she whispered dramatically, is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. This didn't have quite the effect she expected. The what? Said Harry and Ron. Oh, honestly, don't you two read? Look, read that. There. She pushed the book toward them, and Harry and Ron read. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Sorcerer's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Purnell. 658. See, said Hermione, when Harry and Ron had finished, the dog must be guarding Flamel's Sorcerer's Stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him, because they're friends and he knew someone was after it. That's why he wanted the stone moved out of Gringotts. A stone that makes gold and stops you from ever dying, said Harry. No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it. And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in the study of recent developments in wizardry, said Ron. He's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he? The next morning, in Defense Against the Dark Arts, while copying down different ways of treating werewolf bites, Harry and Ron were still discussing what they'd do with the Sorcerer's Stone if they had one. It wasn't until Ron said he'd buy his own Quidditch team that Harry remembered about Snape and the coming match. I'm going to play, he told Ron and Hermione. If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their face if we win. Just as long as we're not wiping you off the field, said Hermione. As the match drew nearer, however, Harry became more and more nervous. Whatever he had told Ron and Hermione, the rest of the team wasn't too calm either. The idea of overtaking Slytherin in the house championship was wonderful. No one had done it for 7 years, but would they be allowed to with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went. At times he even wondered whether Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potions lessons were turning into a sort of weekly torture. Snape was so horrible to Harry. Could Snape possibly know they found out about the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry didn't see how he could, yet he sometimes had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. Harry knew, when they wished him good luck outside the locker rooms the next afternoon, that Ron and Hermione were wondering whether they'd ever see him alive again. This wasn't what you called comforting. Harry hardly heard a word of Wood's pep talk as he pulled on his Quidditch robes and picked up his Nimbus 2000. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found a place in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand why they looked so grim and worried, or why they had both brought their wands to the match. Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had secretly practicing the leg locker curse. They'd gotten the idea from Malfoy using it on Neville, and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any signs of wanting to hurt Harry. Now don't forget, it's Loco Mortis, Hermione muttered, as Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve. I know, Ron snapped. Don't nag. Back in the locker room, Wood had taken Harry aside. Don't want to pressure you, Potter, but if we ever need an early capture of the snitch, it's now. Finish the game before Snape can favor Hufflepuff too much. The whole school's out there, said Fred Weasley, peering out of the door. Even blimey Dumbledore's come to watch. Harry's heart did a somersault. Dumbledore, he said, dashing to the door to make sure. Fred was right. There was no mistaking that silver beard. Harry could have laughed out loud with relief. He was safe. There was simply no way that Snape would dare to try to hurt him if Dumbledore was watching. Perhaps that's why Snape was looking so angry as the teams marched on the field, something that Ron noticed too. I've never seen Snape look so mean, he told Hermione. Look, they're off. Ouch! Someone had poked Ron in the back of the head. It was Malfoy. Oh, sorry, Weasley. Didn't see you there. Malfoy grinned broadly at Crabbe and Goyle. Wonder how long Potter's going to stay on his broom this time. Anyone want to bet? What about you, Weasley? Ron didn't answer. Snape had just awarded Hufflepuff a penalty because George Weasley had hit a Bulger at him. Hermione, who had all her fingers crossed in her lap, was squinting fixed at Harry, who was circling the game like a hawk, looking for the snitch. You know how I think. They'll choose people for the Gryffindor team, said Malfoy loudly, and a few minutes later, as Snape awarded Hufflepuff another penalty for no reason at all. It's people they feel sorry for. See, there's Potter, who's got no parents. Then there's the Weasleys, who've got no money. You should be on the team, Longbottom. You've got no brain. Neville went bright red, but turned in his seat to face Malfoy. I'm worth 12 of you, Malfoy, he stammered. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle howled in laughter. But Ron, still not daring to take his eyes from the game, said, You tell him, Neville. Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley. And that's saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point with anxiety about Harry. I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word. Ron, said Hermione suddenly. Harry, what? Where? Harry had suddenly gone into a spectacular dive, which drew gasp and cheer from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her fingers crossed in her mouth as Harry streaked towards the ground like a bullet. You're in luck, Weasley. Potter's obviously spotted some money on the ground, said Malfoy. Ron snapped before Malfoy knew what was happening. Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of his seat to help. Come on, Harry, Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch as Harry sped straight at Snape. She didn't even notice Malfoy and Ron rolling around under her seat, or the scuffles and yelp coming from the whirl of fists that was Neville, Crabbe, and Goyle. Up in the air, Snape turned on his broomstick, just in time to see something scarlet shoot past him, missing by inches, and the next second Harry pulled out of the dive, his arm raised in triumph, the snitch clasped in his hands. The stands erupted. It had to be a record. No one could ever remember the snitch being caught so quickly. Ron, where are you? The game's over. Harry won. We've won. Gryffindor's in the lead, shrieked Hermione, dancing up and down on her seat and having Parvati Patel in the front row. Harry jumped off his broom, a foot from the ground. He couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over. It had barely lasted 5 minutes. As Gryffindors came spilling onto the field, he saw Snape land nearby, white-faced and tight-lipped, when Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Dumbledore's smiling face. Well done, said Dumbledore quietly, so that only Harry could hear. Nice to see you haven't been brooding about that mirror and been keeping busy. Excellent. Snape spat bitterly on the ground. Harry left the locker room alone some time later to take his Nimbus 2000 back to the broom shed. He couldn't ever remember feeling happier. He'd really done something to be proud of now. No one could say he was just famous name anymore. The evening air had never smelled so sweet. He walked over the damp grass, reliving the last hour in his head, which was a happy blur. Gryffindors running to lift him onto their shoulders, Ron and Hermione in the distance, jumping up and down. Ron cheering through a heavy nosebleed. Harry had reached the shed. He leaned against the wood door and looked up at Hogwarts, with its windows glowing red in the setting sun. Gryffindor in the lead. He'd done it. He'd shown Snape. And speaking of Snape, a hooded figure came swiftly down the front steps of the castle, clearly not wanting to be seen. It walked as fast as possible toward the forbidden forest. Harry's victory faded from his mind as he watched. He recognized the figure's prowling walk. Snape, sneaking into the forest while everyone else was at dinner. What was going on? Harry jumped back on his Nimbus 2000 and took off. Gliding gently over the castle, he saw Snape enter the forest at a run. He followed. The trees were so thick he couldn't see where Snape had gone. He flew in circles, lower and lower, brushing the top branches of the tree until he heard noises. He glided toward them and landed noiselessly in a towering beech tree. He climbed carefully along one of the branches, holding on tight to his broomstick, trying to see through the leaves. Below, in a shadowy clearing, stood Snape. But he wasn't alone. Quirrell was there, too. Harry couldn't make out the look on his face, but he was stuttering worse than ever. Harry strained to catch what they were saying. Don't. Why you want to meet here of all places, Severus? Oh, I thought we'd keep this private, said Snape, his voice icy. Students aren't supposed to know about the Sorcerer's Stone, after all. Harry leaned forward. Quirrell was mumbling something. Snape interrupted him. Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet? But, Severus, you don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell, said Snape, taking a step toward him. I don't want what you know perfectly well what I mean. An owl hooted loudly, and Harry nearly fell out of the tree. He steadied himself in time to hear Snape say, Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting. But I don't. Very well, Snape cut in. We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie. He threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. It was almost dark now, but Harry could see Quirrell, standing quite still as though he was petrified. Harry, where have you been? Hermione squeaked. We won! We won! We won! You won! Shouted Ron, thumping Harry on the back. and I gave Malfoy a black eye, and Neville tried to take on Crabbe and Goyle single-handed. He's still out cold, but Madame Pomfrey says he'll be all right. Talk about showing Slytherin. Everyone's waiting for you in the common room. We're having a party. Fred and George stole some cakes and stuff from the kitchens. Never mind that now, said Harry breathlessly. Let's find an empty room. You wait till you hear this. He made sure Peeves wasn't inside before shutting the door behind them. Then he told them what he'd seen and heard. So we were right. It's the Sorcerer's Stone. And Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy. And he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things guarding the stone, apart from Fluffy. Loads of enchantments, probably. And Quirrell would have done some anti-dark arts spells that Snape needs to break through. So you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape? Said Hermione in alarm. It'll be gone by next Tuesday, said Ron. Tomorrow's chapter is chapter 14, Norbert, the Norwin Ridgeback.